Matthew Heineman, director of The First Wave. This is such a harrowing and important documentary covering the first 4 months of the pandemic at one of the hardest hit hospitals in New York. When did you know you wanted to make a film about COVID?
I think I woke up sort of in early March, and as this issue started to become plastered across headlines and we were inundated with stats and misinformation, I just felt this huge obligation to tell this story. Like previous films I made, I wanted to try to humanize this issue, put a human face to it. And so I sought, hospitals around the country to try to get access and ultimately gain access in my hometown here in New York.
Mm-hmm. How difficult was that? You guys shot at Long Island Jewish Hospital in Queens, and because it seems like because you guys started shooting in March, so it was like you guys got in almost immediately, right?
Yeah, I mean, we got in there as fast as we could get in there, and yeah, it was extremely difficult to get access, and obviously terrifying. We knew so little about the disease, how it's transmitted, and we used the best science available to try to keep both our crew safe and those who we were filming with.
Mm. What were the logistics involved for you to be able to shoot there?
In regards to
like did you guys have a room, or what were the protocols in place for you guys?
Yeah, again, we used the best science available at the time to try to keep ourselves safe. We were given one N95 mask for 2 weeks that we had to reuse. The resources were incredibly scarce at that time, so we were sort of reinventing the rules every few days as information came to us. But it was a terrifying experience. As someone who's made films in different war zones and different conflict zones, you can somewhat sort of detach your brain when you come home, although these stories never really leave you. And with this, we're living the same thing that we're documenting. So it was a full-on 24/7, experience for not just days, but weeks and months. So it was definitely the hardest film I've ever made, on almost every single level. But I think what drove us and what inspired us were the subjects that we were following, the doctors and nurses on the front lines trying to save patients with such limited information and tools. And I think, yeah, every single day we just witness such beautiful moments of humanity and love and courage. And I think that's the overwhelming feeling that we had every day, despite the terror of it all.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because one of the people you follow, Dr. Natalie DJ, she says doctors, they're taught to follow pattern recognition, and as of that moment, there's no clear pattern with the virus. And I love what you said, earlier about you weren't able to shut your brain off, because I was thinking in your previous films, you're in war-torn areas, but it's dangerous, but it's not like there's a shootout every day or something, but this is it's unpredictable and you could get sick yourself. So I guess what at the end of the day, what was it what was I imagined it wasn't the same every day. You go home and what were you thinking? Are you just working and trying to edit what you got, or did you try to take a break from it all?
No, I mean, we were working 16, 18 hours a day, especially for the first sort of month or so. We so naively thought that we'd be living this for 1 or 2 weeks. Obviously that didn't happen, and we ended up filming for months, and we're still living with it today. There was not a lot of detachment. This was a 24/7 thing for a very long period of time. And but I felt like, I don't know, in some sense it sounds sort of cheesy, but my whole career sort of built up to this moment. And I just felt this enormous obligation with this story. It was the most, one of the most historic things to ever happen in our lifetime. And I think one of the greatest tragedies of COVID is that we as a general public have been, and especially in those early days, we're so shielded from the horrors of what was happening inside hospitals. And I think that's part of what allowed it to become so politicized. This didn't have to happen this way. COVID could have brought our country together, but instead it further divided us. And I think a big part of that is the fact that, the American public and the public at large really had so little knowledge of what was happening, and nothing to sort of rally around or come together around. And so that's what allowed misinformation and many other things to fester.
Mm-hmm. You follow three people in the film. How did you land on these three subjects? One is a doctor, and two of them are patients, but they're both essential workers. One is a police officer, Ahmed Ellis, and another is a nurse, Brussels Jamon.
Yeah, I always wanted to make, a character-driven film. I didn't want to make sort of how did we get here, what happened. There's no talking heads, there's no experts, there's no stats, there's no cards. It's an experiential film in which I wanted the audience to be on the ground experiencing this, as doctors experienced this, as nurses experienced it, as patients and family members experienced it. And so, yeah, we ended up following a doctor, a nurse, and two patients over the course of these 4 months. And I think one of the most insidious parts of COVID was how isolating it was. That these really difficult life or death decisions were being made over iPads and iPhones. And so it was really important for me to get outside of the hospital, to leave those four walls, and to see how this was affecting family members. And so I'm incredibly indebted to the Gabon family and to the Ellis family for letting us in as their loved ones were, on the edge of life and death inside the hospital.
Mm-hmm, for sure. Well, another thing you could not have foreseen coming was the death of George Floyd and Black Lives Matter, and you incorporate that into the film. And there's a line in there, I think, again, from Natalie, like she says, like, it's so hard being a doctor when you're trying to save lives, and this is just a blatant disregard for human life. So can you talk about like following her and filming that?
Sure, yeah. After a few weeks of filming inside the hospital, it became very, very, very clear you don't need to be a scientist or an epidemiologist or, an expert to see that this disease was disproportionately impacting people of color. And so it was through Dr. Duje, who's a first-generation American, our family's from Haiti, that we were able to explore those themes. And then when George Floyd was killed, and these streets around me that had previously been empty for months were filled with protesters and energy, that this, national reckoning over systemic racism, which was directly tied to the disproportionate impact of this disease on people of color, that, we had to follow the story, and it just all happened naturally by following Dr. Duje.
Mm-hmm. So how long did you film for altogether?
We filmed in earnest for about 4 months. We continued to film past the first wave into the summer, into the fall. And it was really not until the edit room that we came up with the title, The First Wave, and those goalposts of sort of March to April. And that, was a big victory in the edit room to sort of give us a roadmap, and all of our subjects had very natural arcs over those 4 months. And so every time we tried to put a scene in from a different from after that, it never worked. So that's why we sort of settled on The First Wave.
Mm-hmm. I understand you also interviewed Andrew Cuomo, but you cut out the interviews after his scandal and he left office. But you still, that they're in the film, like there's still a narration from him, like from his daily press conferences. And can you talk about like keeping those in the film?
Sure. Yeah. There's no, with most of my films, I try to sort of stay out of politics. I think there's enough politics and polarization in our world already. I hope that my films, bring people together and allow people to have a dialogue around an issue. And that's what I certainly wanted to do with this film. So there's no Trump, there's no Fauci. The reason that Andrew Cuomo is in the film is he provided, a metronome daily for all of us living in New York, many people across the US and in fact the world. And so we wanted to allow his voice to sort of mimic that experience that we all had. So, he's not in there for sort of political reasons. I did spend more time filming with him. But, as we were finishing the edit, I didn't want that to be a distraction to the rest of of the film. And, it never was an examination of his performance or his character, who he was. So, that's why we settled where we did.
Mhm. Some people are not ready to watch a COVID documentary. COVID's not over. So what would you say to people who are hesitant to watch this film, and what do you hope viewers get out of watching this?
Yeah, I mean, I never make films for sort of one specific targeted silver bullet reason. I think 100 different people watching this film will hopefully take 100 different things away from it. I love embracing the complexity of the human condition, and I think this film is about many things. It's about, obviously, on one hand, it's about COVID. It's about, systemic racism. It's about families and love and birth and death. I mean, it's about touches on many aspects of the human condition. But I think, I guess in some sense, if I was going to really distill it, it's about how human beings came together in the face of crisis. I think that's what we witnessed every single day. That's what inspired us. And that's what, I didn't go to bed at night when making this film sort of sad about the state of the world. I went to bed at night feeling deeply inspired. And so I think while it is a difficult subject, while I think there's an inclination in America or just in human nature to want to move on and not look back, I hope that this film, creates a space for us all to reflect on what we've been through, take stock of where we are now, and what have we learned as we move forward into the future. There's no question that we've all changed. You've changed, I've changed, the fabric of society has changed, the way we communicate has changed. And so I hope that this film creates a space for us to reflect on all that.